This is the Zemar Podcast. Elite Benefits of America helps small and mid-sized companies with their health insurance programs. And now, your host, Butch Zemar.
So at one point in time when I was in the Navy, I received orders to go to the USS Constellation, which is now decommissioned. I was in Virginia Beach at the time. My job, I guess you could say, was attached to a shore command, and we went temporary assigned duties, or TAD, out to an air wing, and my air wing was on the East Coast. And so this one was just because my name was pulled. That's really all it came down to. Sure, I was a select few, but the few was still a larger number, and three of us got our names pulled, and they flew us across the United States because the Constellation was in San Diego. It's the first time I was on the West Coast, and the West Coast was completely different than the East Coast. And there's good and bad and the ugly that comes out of that. But, same thing that's saying that the people born and raised in Chicago versus born and raised in Miami versus born and raised in Los Angeles are all different, right? It's the same thing, right? So there's nothing new there, but they fly us across the United States. We did have a layover in Texas and then finally made it to San Diego. It seemed like it took literally all day, but I guess what you get for economy flights. And this was prior to 9/11. I don't know what it's like today, but I know my experience with flying as a active military person, that prior to 9/11, they didn't care about military. At least that was my impression, 18, 19, 20 years old. They didn't care about where you sat or how things worked out, or they bumped you from flights. They just didn't have any care. And now they'll actually move you to first class without even asking for upgrades or fees or anything. They do a bunch of stuff now, and it's great. I think that's awesome. But so anyhow, it was a long flight. We were in the back of the planes, get across the United States, and apparently they canceled our orders mid-flight. And they said that when we showed up on board the ship that they had canceled the orders. They didn't really need us after all. They had figured out what was wrong, even though they were working on it for a couple months and they couldn't figure it out, so they needed help. And so we sat on board the ship for 10 days. They had a 10-day detachment is what they called it. Who knows what it is today, but 10 days out at sea, and we did nothing. I read books. I assisted here and there, but they couldn't activate orders to send us back soon enough, so they just left us there. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. We've had other situations where we were called to a job and it didn't pan out just because of either logistics, money, supplies, whatever it might be, manpower. Then other times it works. So there was another time I was temporarily assigned to work on S-3 Vikings, and we worked on this big bench that was called the AMP-60. It was made in the 50s. This was late 90s, early 2000s, and it was a hunk of garbage, but it still somehow powered on, and it worked, right? And so we worked on these flare pods for the airplane. All that's decommissioned now, but it definitely was a camera that they used for anti-submarine warfare. I was assembled with a team. We worked on the project. We resolved the problem. It took us a long time. It took a lot of resources. It took a lot of cash from the military to get them up and running, but it certainly worked out. But even bringing it back to business, right? Even here's a personal story. Internally, we thought we needed to hire another employee at one point in the last year, and so to get ready for that employee, we felt that we had to clean up, right? Like, so it's kind of like when you have guests at the house, you just want to clean up and make it look presentable. And we did what most businesses would do, is just go through our process and say, okay, how do we do things and what can we do better to make it easier for somebody to adapt and learn faster. And so during that process, and it took weeks, but we streamlined a bunch of stuff. We were figuring out there were certain steps that were away from other steps, and so we aligned those. We eliminated steps altogether. We eliminated items altogether to the point where we didn't have to do them anymore. And it got to the point where we streamlined it enough that we basically still needed help, but not a 40-hour a week person. And so it worked out, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, right? So things like that work in business. And I was having a lunch meeting recently with a friend in the industry. I have friends in low places. I collaborate with other insurance agents. So even though we're competition, we're really not. The market's big enough. But, friends go a long way, and it's super hard to run into our own business together. And if we do, at least we're cordial about the opportunities. But, a conversation did come up about, one niche he works on is PEO exits and PEO alternatives. So it was a good engaging shop talk, a lot of insurance lingo. So if you were sitting at a table next to us, you would probably be spinning your head because the topics that we were talking about were non-related to the common person. But it was definitely intellectually it was a good conversation because it was kind of like ping pong going back and forth. It was a fun game. And so why do employers look at PEOs, right? PEO stands for a professional employer organization. It could be viewed at different angles of like, what is that exactly, right? And so in this particular place or this PEO that we refer to in the benefits industry is more of a co-employer relationship to piggyback on large company benefits. And so the perception you give to your employees is that you're joining forces with a larger entity. Technology you can't buy, like just some of the stuff you just couldn't get there. And also HR help, right? You couldn't pay for some of the help that they provide. Including attorneys and legal stuff that's related to employment, because their skin's in the game as much as yours is. They take some of the operations off your back, right, and streamline things. And related to health insurance or benefit packages, it can actually be richer for a lower cost. It really could be. I do think that in some cases that a PEO may not be a good fit just for the health insurance. I think if your main motive to move, and this is from the world of Butch Zemar, if your main motive is actually to move to a PEO for health insurance or workers' comp situations, it's means to an end. It'll last a year or two, and then all the nuances of a PEO will come out because you didn't have a general purpose. It's like going into any marriage or friendship that only has one meaning or cause, unless that meaning and cause is the only time you interact. So, like for example, I know this hockey guy. He played some minor league hockey back in the day. He's a little bit more senior, and he plays twice a week with the same group of people in the same rink. It's a rad hockey group, and it's the same people all the time. And that's the only engagement he has with them. And everyone has nicknames, and he said for 2 years he never knew what anybody's real name was. And on top of that, he had no idea what occupations they had. And he also commented he didn't really care because the value of the relationship is on the ice, and they spend an hour and a half on the ice, and then they're off and they go their separate ways, and that's it. And that's acceptable in a lot of ways. But if there's a longer term commitment where there's a bond and whether it's friendship or marriage, right? It's got to be more than one purpose. Otherwise, it just means to an end. And same thing with PEOs, right? I do think that benefits and workers' comp insurance pieces are a great benefit and a great reason to move to a PEO. I just think if it's the sole purpose, a lot of the other restrictions that come into play from a co-employment contract, I think, could come to light later. But if you look at it as a whole thing, like you're outsourcing HR, you don't have to pay for that, right? What is that worth to you? If you had bigger dilemmas as you're growing, you have a legal team and HR support staff to support it. If you're going to be hiring in areas you have no clue about because you never visited there, that's where a PEO comes in because they're going to make sure that you stay in compliance. If you scale from 10 employees to 12,000 employees, maybe a PEO might be a good fit during that process. It may not be at 12,000, but during that growth mode, you don't have to worry about technology breaking or payroll systems. You're outgrowing them. It's all done for you. And so it makes it a lot easier. So with a PEO, and I mentioned before, it's a co-employment agreement. And so it's essentially one tax ID number, which is no longer yours. And you have one payroll system. And so you're basically a subsidiary of another company without any ownership obligation on the parent company. It's just there for operations purposes. That's it. So you eliminate a lot of worries and needs by doing it, but also you give up some things too. You kind of eliminate some of the responsibility of being an employer related to HR and benefits and operations. And sure, you're paying a fee for it, but it's a fraction of the cost of trying to figure out yourself, the time involved, and the employees. You gain access to manpower you just couldn't afford. And if you gain access to all the support system and corporate structure that might be there, including the benefit package, it just makes growth a little bit easier if that's your goal, right? It just takes one thing off your desk that you even have to worry about. Plus, you join access to a larger pool. Now, each PEO could charge each one of the employers a different rate based on the risk, but generally speaking, there's a chance that you're going to get lower rates because of buying power. But the reality is all that good stuff, because it is a really great tool, and that's what it is as a tool, right? And if the tool isn't right at the time, or it was at the time, and now it's no longer, right? So you're taking a box apart, you might need a crowbar to get the box apart, and then once that box is open, you don't no longer need the crowbar. So it just depends on what level you are in your business. But most of the time, PEOs are not a good fit. And so those who represent PEOs that might be listening to this, it's not really anything negative towards them. I'm just saying that it has to be a good fit to go into a PEO or it doesn't work. There's too many contract restrictions. And I'm not saying that as a negative. I'm just saying maybe at a period of time in your business, it's good, right? It eliminates some things. You give up some of the control for a lot of gain. And then once you get to the other side, then you take back those controls. You could be too high of a risk for that PEO. It just may not be a fit. And that happens probably more times than them, you exploring, and it just may not be a good fit. So the high risk could be health insurance wise. It could be workers' comp wise. A lot of PEOs have started doing carve-outs. These carve-outs allow you opportunities to still get a PEO structure. So it's more of administrative services. And so you basically get operations without the insurance benefits. And so you still insure those separately, and it might be better off that way. So you get a structure of scalability with inside of a company without, you could have flexibility with insurance. So there are some of my clients that are like that, where operations are set up through a PEO, but insurance benefits are outside of that. So when we continue the conversation, we actually talked about, PEO exits and alternatives. And so obviously, there is a great benefit to go into a PEO. It's just not a good fit for everybody. And so what does that look like? What is the PEO alternative, right? And because you want structure, you want scalability, you want all this stuff, how do you get access to it, right? And so you have the need for HR support, payroll, but you cannot spend the time or resources on it. So you find a team to take care of it, right? And there's a lot of resources out there. You just don't have to do it. So, and that's actually what this guy was doing, is that he had a team, and he has be able to provide HR services, the dedicated people that you actually call and you actually talk to them. And I wouldn't be surprised that their cell phone is given out, so you can get a hold of them even if they're not in the office. Just a personalized service, right? And you're not paying full-time benefits. You're not paying full-time workers' comp or salaries. It's outsourced. So you pay for that, and you pay for a technology system that's scalable. So if you went from 10 employees to 12,000, you're going to be there. And you don't have to go out there and do the homework for the technology. It's already done for you. And so there's you assemble a team that already knows the stuff. We do it too. It's just he goes out there, and that's what he talks about. And whereas us, it's a case by case that we try to solve problems for employers. So when this comes up, then we bring in the PEO alternative ideas. And the biggest thing is you just don't have the time and the money or the resources to invest in who's your team, who's the technology, and how you're going to supply the benefits in what way. And Do we keep doing it the traditional way? Because you're not going to be able to scale if you do it the traditional way. So you assemble a team for it. For the benefits, right? And so a lot of times these teams will actually explore not only traditional benefits, but also offer what we call fully insured. But we look at other options such as self-funded and level funded, right? Because the fully insured provides less options. At the end of the day, they give you less leverage. You can't pull enough strings to actually help control costs. They have less transparency, even though they have laws that are passed now that they're supposed to provide more information. None of us have seen it yet, but who knows what they're actually going to supply, if it's even valuable. I just think that they're gaming the system and they don't want to show you. And then you get blind increases, right? Here's another 10 to 12% increase. Your broker goes back and says, hey, I shaved off a few points. It's going to be 7.5%. So he's the hero of the day, but life goes on, but they're blind increases. Whereas self-funded, you have just more leverage, right? Yeah, so there's more involved. It's not as risky as some people portray it to be. Level funded is more of a common element for small and mid-sized companies because you don't have to worry about the ups and downs of claims, whereas self-funded bigger companies usually do this, and they have a little bit more control of the cash flow going in and out. But if we compare it to other items and that you do have control of, if you had an 8% increase in payroll taxes, you would consult with a CPA or tax attorney to actually try to get that lowered. If you had an 8% increase on overhead costs, whether it's operations, manufacturing, products, goods and services, whatever it might be, you would hands down look at alternatives to get that control that cost. You might not be able to get it down to a 0% increase, but you're going to combat thing, and even if you just move the needle by 1%, you're going to make it work. Healthcare should not be any different. People just give up on it. So with self-funded, level funded, we have levers to pull that can help control that cost, right? It just makes it a lot easier. One example I give is that it's kind of like sailing a boat and you have all these ropes, you don't know what to do, but like when the wind changes, which business changes and life cycles changes and benefit programs changes, you have to pull a different rope, right? And so with fully insured, you just don't have hardly any ropes to pull to change the sail, and you might be dead in the water. Whereas in level funded and self-funded, you get more ropes to actually pull along. For HR services, that's the biggest thing, especially if you're looking at growth or stability inside of a company, and a PEO offers HR. The easiest thing to solve most small business problems is just actually getting access to the resource for it. And so they have this tele-HR program we offer to our clients. You could call in or log into the dashboard. You could search for key documents, whether it's state or federal related or any type of regulation you have to look up. You could even update your employee handbook in there. And there's a number of things you could just do self-service, and that's fantastic because that would resolve a huge amount of issues that are in the workplace because they don't even know where to go. Keyword searches, they don't even know even what questions to ask, and you just submit a question. Hey, I got this situation, I don't know where to go. Can you point me in the right direction? It's the same thing that the PEO would do. On top of that, you could do HR outsourcing. That's what my friend's company was doing, is that they actually had HR personnel on staff that you're paying a service fee for, but you're not putting them on salary and providing benefits and paying workers' comp. But you could do HR outsourcing. A lot of times it's in a retainer or a package. Again, they're not an employee, and it'll cost you less overall, and you could hold them more accountable. Whereas a lot of times if there's mistakes internally, you have to eat it. And it depends on what those mistakes are. But I'm just saying that if there's an oversight somewhere, a lot of times these companies will make up for it. And it works out just great. And you don't have to pay extra for some of those oversights. But at the same token is you're paying somebody to take care of things that might take you 4 times as longer. And so there's value in that. So let's talk about the PEO exit. The strategy is key, right? You can't do this overnight. It's like moving a big ship. You have to have a lot of lead time because you need opportunities to move things to the PEO alternative, and you need to give some time to the PEO. You have to read the contract because there's cancellation clauses on there that you have to notify them in a certain time frame, and it could be longer than you expect, and then you're stuck for another year having to deal with all this. So you got to check those. And you have to do your homework to piece all these puzzles together. PEO brings a lot to the table, and now you have to unwind it. And it just takes a lot to go through that. You definitely have to check every box on that list. You got HR, payroll, technology, workers' comp, healthcare, manpower, including HR. And so there's all these things you have to address. And then your time is important, right? So like you're going to have to assemble a team in some capacity. You go to, like my friend, go to his team, and you could actually have everything handed to you and just say, hey, here's the checklist. This is what we need. This is how we're going to transition. This is what the cost is going to be. And a lot of people don't like change, so they settle for whatever's there, and they just stay, and they just kind of grump about it, and they don't really want to do anything. They kind of explore options. They feel like it's just this big, heavy ball they're trying to move every year to try to get out. Don't settle for that. Definitely look for other options to see what's a better fit. You might find out in the process that a PEO is actually the best fit for you, and you just stay. Maybe you just switch PEOs. Maybe it's just the experience you're getting with one. Because PEOs can be a really good fit for some companies. And so don't eliminate the idea. I'm just saying that you may have to look at some other options, or if you're in one and you're looking to get out. The last thing I'll go over is most companies fear change. So whether you're going to a PEO or you're coming out of PEO, they just fear this change, right? There's payroll and use of technology and benefits and HR, and like how do you manage all this, right? But and then the bigger issue, and we address some of those, but the bigger issue we run into, because we deal with the health insurance packages, is like moving this from fully insured to a level funded or self-funded. People get leery because they'll hear, well, we still get 10% increase. So they're like, what's the deal, right? And so I thought I would share a case study when it comes to those benefits and moving to those directions where you can pull levers. So even if you're not ready for the PEO alternative, but you're trying to control some element of cost, benefits is just one piece of it, right? So we had this one company, first year, we moved to a self-funded product, and they saved 20%. So if you were paying $100,000 a month in this example, it would be $80,000 in premium per month, right? And so if you do the math, right, let's go look over a 5-year period, and let's just say the premium increases are roughly the same. For my math here, an example, it was about 10%. There were some plus or minus points, but I just treated both premiums with 10% increases throughout the years. By making this move over a 5-year period, this company had saved $351,384. I'm sorry, and that's just from the monthly savings. Over the 5-year period on an annual basis was $1,465,224. That's just crazy, the amount of savings over the 5-year period. So let's just say there was a $100,000 a month premium and you received 20% savings, you're at $80,000 per month. And even if you get the same 10% increases over the years, and you do the math, so over a yearly period over those 5 years, right, you're going to save about, on an average, $351,000 per year is what the average was. And so over a 5-year period, it's almost $1.5 million that you would save in this particular case study, even if you got the same percentage increases a fully insured platform. And it doesn't restrict benefits at all. In fact, it might actually enhance it and give you better. But even if you're a small group, let's say it's 10% of that, right? So your premiums are $10,000 a month versus $100,000 a month. And over a 5-year period, you would save just about $150,000 in premium. That's huge for the small business. It's huge. Don't, be afraid of change. Just get a little more information, have the resources, find the right team. You'll be on your way to save money in the workplace, hire and attracting great talent.